Most people aren't lost because they took the wrong path. They're lost because they were never taught who they really are. They were trained to be useful, not whole. Told to smile when they were breaking. Praised for being strong, even as they collapsed in silence. You might know this feeling well. The constant exhaustion. The sense that something's missing, even when everything looks fine. The quiet thought you try to ignore. Is this all there is? Carl Jung didn't teach people how to be happy. He taught them how to return. To return to themselves after years of running. To escape the inner prisons they didn't even know they were trapped in. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Your suffering isn't always noble. Sometimes it's self-abandonment in disguise. Sometimes, the very ways you learn to survive are the same thing slowly killing your soul. This video isn't about surface-level advice. It's about the hidden architecture of your pain, the invisible places your soul has been living in, without your permission, and how to finally leave them. We'll walk through the 4 most dangerous places your soul must escape, and the one sacred place it was always meant to return to. By the end, you won't just understand your patterns, you'll know how to break them, for good. So if you've ever felt like you've been disappearing behind your own smile, stay. This might be the map you didn't know you were missing. There's a war most people are fighting silently, and it's not against the world. It's against themselves. The way they speak to themselves when no one is watching. The way they swallow their rage with a smile, dismiss their desires as selfish, and bury their truth to be accepted. This is the birthplace of self-rejection. Not a dramatic breakdown, but a quiet erosion. Carl Jung warned that what we repress doesn't disappear. It waits. It becomes shadow. And the more we deny it, the more it controls us from the dark. Many working-class people were taught early to be good, stay quiet, or earn love through sacrifice. They never learned to sit with their anger, their fear, their hunger for more. Instead, they were taught to feel ashamed of it. That shame became their compass and led them astray. Self-rejection is one of the most dangerous psychological traps because it hides beneath survival. You get praised for being the nice one, the strong one, the one who never asks for help. You show up for others, perform under pressure, smile through exhaustion, and no one sees that you're bleeding inside. Jung understood that this kind of repression isn't strength, it's fragmentation. When you reject the parts of yourself that feel inconvenient, painful, or unacceptable, you don't become more whole, you become divided. That division doesn't stay quiet. It leaks out in toxic patterns. You attract partners who reflect your self-loathing. You sabotage opportunities because deep down, you don't believe you're worthy. You smile when someone steps on your boundaries because you don't believe you're allowed to say no. The unconscious mind doesn't forget what you try to erase. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens to people who live in self-rejection. They keep finding themselves in the same cycles, burned out at work, used in relationships, emotionally numb or overwhelmed. Not because they're cursed, but because a rejected self is a self at war. And war always has casualties. For the working poor, this can look like staying in a toxic job out of guilt. For mothers, it might mean putting everyone's needs above their own until their body collapses. For men, it often becomes silent rage or addictions. In each case, the deeper need isn't more discipline, it's integration. Integration doesn't mean becoming perfect, it means becoming real. Jung called this individuation, the process of unifying the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche into one authentic self. It begins the moment you stop performing and start listening. When you hear your jealousy and say, "What are you afraid of?" When you sit with your rage and ask, "Where were you hurt?" When you feel envy and dig beneath it to find your buried potential. These aren't flaws. They're fragments of your story that want to come home. Most people think healing is about cutting parts out. Jung believed it was about bringing them back with compassion. Because what you refuse to love inside you will continue to control you from the shadows. The trap of self-rejection is especially seductive in cultures that reward performance. You get applause for being strong, never for being whole. You get promotions for your productivity, not for your peace. So people learn to wear a mask, to play the part, to say what's expected. And slowly, the mask becomes their identity. They forget who they are underneath. They stop dreaming, creating, desiring, not because they don't care, but because they've disconnected from their body, from their soul, from the voice inside that once whispered, "I want more." Jung warned that repression leads to depression, not growth. And the working class knows this deeply, not in books, but in their bones. You can see this everywhere. In the father who never cries, but drinks in silence. In the woman who cares for everyone but hates herself in the mirror. In the young man addicted to screens because reality feels unbearable. They're not weak. They're fragmented, living in systems that taught them to survive by rejecting what made them human. And no amount of self-help slogans can fix what was built on shame. What heals is truth. And truth starts with noticing how often you say, "I'm fine," when you're not. How often you feel guilty for needing rest. How often you abandon your own needs to keep peace. These are not signs of maturity. They are signs of internal abandonment. But there's a way out. And it doesn't start with fixing yourself. It starts with seeing yourself. Noticing the child inside you who was told to stay small. Hearing the voice you've silenced for decades. Giving a name to the anger that's been hiding behind your smile. The real self, the one buried beneath performance and guilt, never died. It's waiting. And it doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be honest. To reclaim what you've disowned. To look in the mirror and say, "I'm still here." That's the first act of freedom. The refusal to keep betraying yourself just to be loved. Because no external validation can heal a soul that has exiled its truth. So if you're tired of being strong, of being good, of being what everyone expects, maybe it's time to stop. Not to fall apart, but to come together. To return to yourself, one shadow at a time. Because the self you've been rejecting is the key to your strength. It holds your boundaries, your vision, your voice. It holds the fire you thought was lost. And the moment you choose to listen to it, instead of silence it, that's the moment you stop surviving and start becoming. Becoming not who the world trained you to be, but who you were before the world trained you. And that leads us to a deeper question. What happens when pain isn't healed, but weaponized? There's a kind of suffering that doesn't scream. It lingers. It becomes part of your body, your tone of voice, your worldview. You think you've moved on, but it shows up in how fast you get irritated, how quickly you assume the worst, how easily you close yourself off. Carl Jung knew this well. Pain that isn't transformed becomes poison. Not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet corrosion. For people who grew up with scarcity, betrayal, or abandonment, the past doesn't stay in the past. It becomes a home. And many don't even realize they're living there. They just know that joy feels foreign, that trust feels dangerous, and that they feel permanently tired. Unprocessed pain has a way of disguising itself as personality. I don't need anyone. I'm just not a happy person. People always let me down. These aren't truths. They're defense mechanisms, coping strategies built from old wounds. Jung called this psychic residue, unresolved trauma that calcifies into identity. You start organizing your life around avoidance, avoiding intimacy, avoiding risk, avoiding anything that might reopen the wound. But here's the trap. The more you avoid your pain, the more control it has. It begins to narrate your choices, filter your reality, and define your future. What was once a single heartbreak now colors every relationship. What was once a moment of loss becomes a lifelong narrative of being unworthy. Resentment is one of the most toxic expressions of unprocessed pain. It feels righteous. It feels like strength. But in truth, it's a slow emotional death. You replay what they did. You fantasize about closure or revenge. You turn the betrayal into your identity. And while they move on, you stay stuck, emotionally frozen in time. Jung would say you're not in your present. You're haunting your own past. Many working-class people carry this kind of quiet fury. The parent who worked 2 jobs and never received appreciation. The friend who was always there for others but left alone in crisis. The partner who gave everything and got betrayed. These stories don't just hurt, they harden. And what hardens begins to die. But even more dangerous than resentment is nostalgia for the version of yourself that no longer exists. People romanticize their past, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. They revisit old dreams, old loves, old identities, not to heal, but to escape. And slowly, they abandon the present. Jung warned that those who live in the past become ghosts in their own lives. You see it in people who constantly talk about what could have been, who idealize old memories while missing new opportunities. They were stuck in what Jung called the graveyard of the psyche, a place where the past is worshipped and the future is feared. And in that space, growth becomes impossible. Healing requires confrontation. You can't just bury the past. You have to exhume it, examine it, and extract the wisdom it left behind. Otherwise, it rots beneath the surface, contaminating everything you try to build. Jung described this process as psychological alchemy, turning the lead of suffering into the gold of self-knowledge. But alchemy isn't passive. It demands effort. It means feeling the hurt you've avoided, grieving what was lost, and admitting what still wounds you. For many, that process feels too big, too raw, too late. But the cost of avoidance is much higher. You trade temporary comfort for permanent stagnation. You protect the pain and sacrifice your future. There's a common lie people tell themselves: time heals all wounds. But Jung knew time does nothing unless you do the work. Emotional healing is not automatic. It's intentional. You must choose to stop feeding the pain. Stop rehearsing the same story. Stop using your suffering as a shield. Otherwise, you'll keep bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You'll pass down the same pain you swore you'd end. You'll become the very force of harm you once feared. And the saddest part? You'll still feel like a victim. Not because others keep hurting you, but because you haven't released what they left behind. So how do you begin? With honesty. With the courage to name what you've been carrying. With the decision to stop romanticizing your pain and start listening to it. Pain is not the enemy, it's the messenger. It shows you where your boundaries were violated, where your needs were ignored, where your story got interrupted. When you stop trying to silence that messenger, you gain access to your own transformation. The betrayal becomes a lesson. The loss becomes a teacher. The grief becomes a door back to yourself. And for the first time, the past loses its grip, because you've stopped using it to define who you are. But there's one more layer we haven't explored yet. What happens when, after pain poisons your soul, you start hiding behind a mask just to be liked? When your identity becomes performance? That's where we go next. It's easy to forget who you are when your whole life is spent trying to be who others expect. You wake up, put on your mask, play your role, and hope the world applauds. At first, it works. People smile. You're accepted. You avoid conflict. But deep down, something starts to ache. Carl Jung called this the danger of the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. It's not inherently bad. Everyone needs some kind of mask to function in society. But the danger begins when the mask becomes more real than the person beneath it. You start performing instead of living. And eventually, you lose access to your own truth. Performance is seductive because it gets rewarded. The quiet girl who always agrees is called sweet The overachieving son gets praised for being disciplined. The man who suppresses his sadness is respected for being strong. But none of these are true identities. They're costumes. And every time you wear them, the real you steps further into the shadows. Jung warned that the longer you wear the mask, the harder it becomes to take off. And this is especially true for working-class people who've been taught that survival means being agreeable, productive, or emotionally silent. They learn to perform resilience, but inside, they're exhausted. Over time, the performance stops being a choice and becomes a prison. You don't know what you actually want anymore. You don't remember what joy feels like. You can't even cry without feeling guilty. Instead, you overthink everything. You become trapped in your own mind, replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, trying to figure out why you feel so empty. Jung saw this as a symptom of spiritual disconnection. Overthinking isn't intelligence. It's fear dressed up as logic. It's the mind trying to compensate for a soul that feels unheard. The more you think, the less you feel. And the less you feel, the more you perform. The modern world encourages this disconnection. Social media turns authenticity into content. Corporate culture demands positivity, no matter the cost. Even therapy gets twisted into another form of performance. Look how self-aware I am. People start performing healing instead of actually doing it, and beneath all of it is silence. A silence that says, "No one sees the real me." Jung knew that this disconnection doesn't just cause pain, it causes collapse. You start breaking down not because you're weak, but because your soul is tired of being ignored. It wants out. Out of the role, out of the image, out of the illusion. But stepping out isn't easy. When you've built a life on being who others needed you to be, taking off the mask feels like death. Who will you be without your persona? What if no one loves the real you? These are terrifying questions, but Jung believed they were necessary. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires you to meet yourself, not just admire your reflection. It means getting intimate with your contradictions, your wounds, your forgotten dreams. And it means grieving the version of you that was never truly you. That's not failure. That's awakening. Because no one can be free while pretending to be someone else. You can begin in small ways. Pause before you say yes to something that feels like a no. Pay attention to the moments when your smile feels forced. Ask yourself, what would I do right now if I wasn't trying to impress anyone? These tiny acts of honesty start to pull you out of the performance and back into presence. The goal isn't to reject all masks, but to know when you're wearing one. To wear it with awareness, not amnesia. That's how you reclaim your voice. That's how you stop acting and start living. Because if you never remove the mask, you'll never know who's underneath. And if you never know who you are, how will anyone else love you fully? You'll keep attracting people who love your performance but can't connect to your truth. And deep down, you'll feel lonely, even when surrounded by praise. That's the curse of the persona. It gives you approval but steals your intimacy. You'll be seen but not known, respected but not held, successful but empty. And no amount of applause will fill that silence. But what if that silence isn't the enemy? What if it's the doorway back to your soul? What if letting go of performance, just for a moment, is what finally allows you to be fully seen, fully felt, fully free? Maybe the real you isn't too much. Maybe the real you is exactly what the world needs. And maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't fall apart when you stop pretending. It begins to make sense. But first, we need to talk about the cost of cutting yourself off from connection and calling it independence. There's a moment when pain becomes too much, and you retreat. You tell yourself it's just a break, just some space. But slowly, that space becomes your world. You stop reaching out. You stop expecting kindness. You stop believing in connection. Carl Jung understood this pattern deeply. He believed the soul doesn't heal in isolation. It heals in relationship. Yet when the world has wounded you enough, solitude starts to look like safety. For many working-class people, isolation becomes a way to survive. You can't be betrayed if you trust no one. You can't be disappointed if you expect nothing. But what protects you also starves you. At first, the silence feels empowering. No more drama, no more demands. You feel in control. But then the days stretch out. The quiet becomes heavy. You realize no one checks in, not because they don't care, but because you stopped showing up. You start to feel invisible. And the worst part? You start to believe you deserve it. Jung warned that emotional isolation often masks deeper wounds of unworthiness. You don't just think people are dangerous. You think you are unlovable. That's why being seen feels threatening. If someone got close enough, they might confirm your deepest fear, that something in you is broken. So you build walls. You make independence your identity. You pride yourself on needing no one. But beneath that pride is loneliness. And beneath that loneliness is fear. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being real. Jung believed that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was a gateway to healing. Without it, you stay locked in your fortress, protected but untouched. You become emotionally numb. Conversations feel superficial. Hugs feel foreign. Joy feels unreachable. And when love finally knocks, you don't open the door. Not because you don't want it, but because you forgot how to receive it. This is the paradox of isolation. You think you're escaping pain, but you're actually preserving it. The solitude that once felt sacred turns into exile. You talk to yourself more than anyone else. You avoid eye contact in public. You keep relationships casual to avoid depth. And little by little, your soul withers. Jung taught that our deepest growth comes through mirrors, through being truly seen by another. Without that mirror, you can't know yourself fully. You become a stranger in your own skin. And no amount of self-care routines can substitute for the healing power of honest human connection. But opening up again isn't just about trusting others. It's about trusting yourself. Trusting that you won't collapse if you're rejected, that your worth isn't determined by someone else's response, that you can survive heartbreak and still stay soft. Many people think healing means never being hurt again. Jung knew better. Healing means becoming whole enough to face hurt without losing yourself. It means showing up anyway, loving anyway, saying, "Here I am," even when your voice shakes. Because true strength isn't silence. It's the courage to let yourself be seen, even after being unseen for so long. For some, connection starts small. A genuine conversation with a stranger, a phone call to someone you've been avoiding, letting a friend really see you, messy, tired, unsure. These moments are scary, but they're also sacred. They begin to melt the frost you've built around your heart. You start feeling again, laughing again, belonging again. And the truth is, you were never meant to survive alone. You were meant to belong, not to everyone, but to someone. Even if that someone starts with yourself. Because when you can sit with your own soul without judgment, you create the capacity to sit with others in love. Jung believed that every soul is shaped in relationship. Not just romantic ones, but friendships, family, community. We are wounded in relationship, but we are also healed there. And if you've been hiding, protecting, numbing, maybe it's time to come back. Not all at once, but piece by piece, breath by breath. Let yourself be known again. Let yourself matter again. Because there's a kind of light that only enters through the eyes of another. A light that says, "You're still here, and you're still worthy." That light cannot be found in isolation. It waits for you in the presence of someone who sees you. But to get there, you must leave the desert. And where do you go when the desert is all you've known? You return, not to the past, not to the pain, but to the present moment, to the only place where wholeness is truly possible. And that's where we're heading next. There's a part of you that never left. Even after the heartbreak. Even after the trauma. Even after you abandoned your own voice to be accepted, liked, safe. That part, call it soul, self, essence, has been waiting. Not in the past. Not in your achievements. But here. Now. Carl Jung believed the journey of healing is not a climb upward, but a spiral inward. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to perform, to please, to disappear. This is the sacred return. The moment you stop searching outside for your worth and start reclaiming what was always yours. For most people, that return begins with exhaustion. They get tired of pretending, tired of fixing everyone else, tired of feeling like they're too much or not enough. It's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough in disguise. Jung knew the psyche creates symptoms when the soul is being ignored. The anxiety, the fatigue, the rage, the apathy, they're not random. They're messages, clues that you've strayed too far from your center. And once you recognize this, the real work begins. Not fixing yourself, but facing yourself. Not deleting the past, but integrating it. Not proving your value, but embodying it, quietly, confidently, without apology. The return to wholeness is not loud. It doesn't happen on stage with applause. It happens in the quiet moments. When you stop saying, "I'm fine," and start saying, "I'm hurting." Oh, when you choose rest over productivity. When you tell the truth even if it shakes your voice. When you sit with your discomfort long enough to understand what it's teaching you. These are not small acts. They are revolutions. Because the world doesn't want you whole. It wants you useful, contained, predictable. But your soul? It was never born to be convenient. It was born to be free. And freedom looks different for everyone. For some, it's walking away from relationships that feed your wounds instead of your worth. For others, it's choosing softness after years of being hard. For many, it's finally admitting, "I don't want to live like this anymore." These declarations don't require permission. They require presence. Jung said that to be whole, you must embrace both light and shadow. That means owning your power without denying your pain, loving your capacity to heal without erasing the scars that shaped you. You don't become real by being perfect. You become real by being honest. Many people ask, "But what do I do next?" The truth is, the next step is never in someone else's advice. It's in your own silence, your own stillness, the place where your deepest knowing lives. You already know where you're fragmented. You already feel what needs to change. But feeling isn't enough. You must act. Not dramatically, not all at once, but daily, deliberately, consistently. Because healing isn't a moment. It's a practice. A choice to return to yourself over and over, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's how you rebuild a life that belongs to you. This isn't about self-improvement. It's about self-remembrance. The parts of you that were silenced. The dreams you buried to survive. The voice that whispered, "There's more to life than this," before it got drowned out by expectations. Jung didn't teach people how to be happy. He taught them how to be whole. And wholeness includes sorrow, contradiction, beauty, rage, forgiveness. It's messy. It's non-linear, but it's real. And once you taste it, once you stop living as a fragment and start embodying your fullness, nothing else will satisfy you. So what does it mean to return? It means no longer outsourcing your value. It means walking away from what shrinks you, even if it's familiar. It means holding space for your complexity without shame. And most of all, it means choosing to show up. For yourself. For your truth. For the life that's trying to reach you. Because your soul has never stopped calling. Every breakdown, every longing, every quiet ache, It's all been the same message. Come home. Not to who you were, but to who you've always been beneath the noise. And now, after all the running, the hiding, the performing, the numbing, it's time. Time to return, to presence, to clarity, to your original self, not someday, not after you've earned it. Now. Because healing doesn't begin when the pain stops. It begins the moment you decide you are worthy of wholeness, exactly as you are. So let this be your permission. Not from me, but from your own soul. You're not too broken. You're not too late. You are still here. And that is more than enough. Now that you've seen the 4 places where the soul quietly dies, the question is, which one have you been living in? Have you been hiding behind strength because you're afraid to fall apart? Numbing your pain with distractions because feeling seems too dangerous? Smiling in public while grieving in silence? Or isolating yourself because it feels safer to be alone than to be disappointed again? The truth is, you don't need more time. You need more truth. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. Because healing doesn't wait. Wholeness doesn't wait. And your soul, your real, untamed, unedited self, is still in there, asking you to come back. So what would it look like to return? What would it feel like to stop performing and start living? To stop analyzing and start feeling? To stop running and finally stand still? If this video resonated with something deep in you, don't let it fade. Reflect. Write. Act. Let it change how you speak to yourself, how you show up, how you protect your soul instead of selling it for approval. And if this message spoke to something you've been carrying for years, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because this isn't the end. It's the beginning of a different way of being. You're not broken. You're not too late. You're simply remembering. So keep going. Your soul knows the way, and it's been waiting for you to return.